Hello everybody, NFX here with another tutorial. This tutorial I'm going to show you an easy way to humanize your drum patterns with just velocity, and we'll talk about some fills and ghost notes as well. In this pattern that you're looking at, it's a simple kick, snare, and hat. That's all there is to this particular pattern. We're not going to focus on any other instrument in the drum kit right now. But let's take a listen to the pattern. This is the before sound, before we humanize it, and I'll let it play through. Okay, so there we have the pattern, and what I'm going to do is alter this pattern so that we can hear a more human feel to it. We're going to start off with the kick drum. The kick drum, if you picture a live drummer playing, the kick drum is controlled by his foot, his or her foot. And basically what they're doing is it's kind of like tapping their foot, but their foot's on a pedal, which causes the kick drum to be hit with the mallet. And the humanization that we can do with regards to the kick drum and the velocity is think about when he's playing that piece. If he's playing hits, for example, this hit, and then there's a big space, and then this hit and this hit, chances are his taps are going to be about the same power. But when he has two notes that are close together, like in this area right here, just out of the natural human ability, his notes are not going to be exactly the same velocity. As a matter of fact, it's likely that one of these two hits is going to be much more dominant than the next one. And that invokes a groove into the kick pattern. And I'm going to demonstrate that by selecting just this area right here, and I'm going to solo the kick because I don't want to the other instruments in the way. And let's listen to what these two hits sound like at the same velocity. Okay, that's it. They sound identical, and there's nothing more to say about that. But now let's hear what they sound like if the first hit is a little bit lower than the second. And in this case, the second hit becomes the dominant hit. And this is what I call a pull, because it's as though the second note is pulling the first one along. So let's hear what this sounds like. Okay, it definitely sounds different than the first pattern. And now let's reverse these guys. And the first note, or the first hit, is now dominant over the second. And this is what I call a push, where the first note is pushing the second note. Okay, and that also has a different feel to it. If you really couldn't hear those differences, listen to the tutorial again on that part. Rewind it and hear exactly what I'm talking about, because if you don't hear that difference, this probably isn't going to make sense to you. But what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to make this second hit dominant over the first one. And the way I picture that, actually, let's do it the other way. The way I picture that is when the drummer is hitting this first note, that second note is coming, is more of an echo or a bounce in his foot, as opposed to two strong hits on the pedal of the kick drum. Okay, so that's going to give us a little bit of humanization to the kick, and that's basically my kick drum tip for humanizing, is wherever they're together, push or pull them, and by making one of the velocities less than the other. Okay, so that's the kick drum. Let's go look at the snare. In the snare pattern, it's real basic. It's the most common pattern that the snare will exist in, in modern 4/4 music, and that is to say that the hits occur on the 2, which is here, and the 4, which is here, and then in the next bar again on the 2 and on the 4. So that's the most basic place you're going to find them. And the first thing I want to talk about is when you're doing a fill. When you're doing a fill, like I might add some notes here to make a fill. And when I'm doing this, let me move that one there. And when I'm doing this, right now they're all the same velocity, but let's just listen to what it sounds like at this point. Okay, and what we can do is humanize in the same manner that we did the kick, but what we'll do is we'll take notes that aren't on the 2 and the 4, and any other note will diminish it by a certain amount. In this case, we'll diminish this one just a little bit, but in the case of these last two, we'll do something a little bit more dramatic with that last note, something like that. And again, we're just dealing with the velocities. Where these occur for this tutorial aren't that important, but the velocities are important. So let's listen again. And hopefully that sounds smoother to your ear than it did before. The next thing I want to show you is ghost notes. And for ghost notes, we'll concentrate with the first half of this pattern. And a ghost note is basically a hit that is very, very low in velocity and volume. And what I like to do is put ghost notes right next to my 2s and my 4s. So I might do something like this. These little tiny velocities represent where the ghost notes are up here. That's this one and this one. Let's hear what this sounds like. Okay, so you can barely hear those particular notes, but they're important because they do give, just like we saw with the kick drum, they do give a groove to the pattern, and you could even do a ghost note after. So in this case, I have a pull because the first note is lower, and then in the second hit, it's going to be like a push. And let's just listen. Okay, so that gives it a definite better groove than if there was just the 2 snare hits on the 2 and the 4. So I'm going to leave those like that, and then I'm just going to, for the fun of it, add another ghost note here. And you could really put ghost notes in a lot of places and make it really, really busy. And a lot of like funk music, there's a lot of ghost notes scattered throughout. But the other thing I want to do is show you how a snare and kicks can kind of dance together. And to show you that, I'm going to turn on the ghost notes. Actually, it's called ghost channels. That's an FL Studio term where it's showing me the notes in the other piano rolls on this particular pattern. But these ones down here on the C3, those are the kicks. And you can see actually in this area where we have this snare hit in between these two kicks, and then this snare hit right here, that's actually playing with the snare. So they're not fighting for the same space and time. Instead, they're kind of bouncing off each other. And what we can do is actually put another hit here, and one hit there, and maybe a hit there. And those will all be like ghost notes. But what I want to do between these two is just raise the velocity a little bit. And between these two kicks on that note, raise the velocity just a little bit. Now these are still well below our normal velocity level, but they're going to give us that interplay between the kicks that we want. Take a listen. Okay, so you can hear now it's starting to really take some shape and get some fullness to the beat. Okay, so let's go now and look at our hi-hat, and I'm going to mute out the other two for now because I want to concentrate on just the hi-hat for a minute. Here you can see that the hi-hat is all the same velocity, and if we listen to that, we can tell with our ear very easily that it's all the same velocity. Definitely there's nothing human feeling about that. As a matter of fact, as that pattern runs on through the whole song, it's going to really give us a computerized feel to it. So what we want to do is we want to humanize this a little bit. And the way I'm going to do that, again, is with velocity. I'm going to take every other one and I'm going to lower it just a little bit, as 50 might say. And but in addition to that, well, let's listen to how this sounds. Now it's subtle, but it sounds more like a tick-tock, tick-tock than it sounds like a tick, 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 tick. So it does have a slight difference in the groove. But in addition to that, I'm really going to go to town with this thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Control to select all of the notes. What I did is I used Control, and then I just dragged a window around it, and all the notes are selected. And then in an FL Studio, I can hold down the Shift key and then drag this set of notes and put them anywhere I want. But in this case, I'm going to put them in between the other notes. Okay? And you can see how it's just a mirror image, just shifted over a little bit. And it's going to have a different groove as well. Busier groove, obviously. But instead of leaving them as just a mirror image of their brother notes, I'm going to lower the velocities even more on these ones. And to make that job easy, I'm going to use the level scaling tool that's built into FL Studio. And with this, I can control the tension, which if I move this, you can see what it's doing below. The multiplier, which can make them all close to where they were. By default, everything's going to be the way it was. And then, for example, I could say, oh, lower these guys down. Make them really almost ghost notes in their own right. Now I'm going to say OK. So now you can see that we have really a nice variety of hits, but they are in a certain pattern because all of our 1, our 2, our 3, our 4 beat is very dominant. Our and beats, which are in the middle, are subdominant. And then these little filler notes in all the off beats just kind of fill in the space. And that's obviously going to make this a rather busy pattern, but let's listen. And that sounds pretty decent to me. Definitely sounds better than just the tick, 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 tick sound that it was originally. Okay, so let's put everything together and hear how it all sounds in one shot. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the original pattern, and then it's going to be followed with this pattern, so you can just have a quick and easy way of comparing the two. The before and then the after. So the before is going to play for 2 bars, and then the after. And there you have it. Obviously, you may not want to go as crazy as I did with regards to making, so many ghost hits and, making your hat pattern as busy as I did. But I did it just to demonstrate how you would do it. And I hope you learned something good and can use it, and maybe it'll spark something creative in you to create something nice out of it. In the meantime, if you have any comments or suggestions, please send them to me at nfxbeats@gmail.com, and I'll do my best to answer your questions and or provide you with a tutorial. I also have a website up, which is probably where you're looking at this tutorial from, www.warbeats.com. So there you have it. Good luck. Goodbye.